Hmm.
I'm gonna try to connect with them. Oh, there you are. Hello. Are you muted?
No.
No. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we are. Yes, I can.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we can hear you.
I don't know what
Let me-
happened. I couldn't join. For some
Oh,
reason.
that's okay.
Game decided I
No
was gonna
problem.
be late.
Let me put you on megaphone.
Suspense.
All right.
Can
Let's hear
everyone
you
hear
tell
me?
us a tale.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Yes?
we can hear you very well.
Good. So, I'm gonna read you a story. That story is from 1899. It was written by Heinrich Seidel, and in its original title, it would be called Rotkirchen, but the English title is Robin. So, if you're all ready, let's lean back and enjoy this very well-aged story, and I hope you're having a good time.
And first, tell us which country this story does come from.
Oh, Germany.
Okay.
It's a German
Awesome.
story.
All right.
Okay, let me see. Mr. Dusedan was 32 years old and a bachelor. He had inherited wealth, and yet, even though he didn't need to pursue a career, his days were filled with such an abundance of activities and work that he had no time at all to waste on thoughts of marriage. The source of all this busyness was his great passion for collecting and his deep-rooted need to do all things most exactingly. His only surviving relative was his elderly aunt Salome, who always wore a snow-white cap with golden yellow straps and who has a very restless spirit. Despite her age, she was fleet on her feet and would spend all day rushing up and down the stairway from the cellar to the attic, from the kitchen to the store. Her approach was always announced with the noisy clattering of her key rings. Just suddenly she would stop and sit in her neatly kept chambers, sewing peacefully. But then, just as quickly, she would appear to have put on coat and shoes, gone to the city, there harried the poor clerks into desperation, returned from the other side of the city, ere you could look the other way. She could run faster than many half her age, and rarely did so due to her impatience. It was a weird thing to see this venerable old lady rushing along the corridors, up and down the stairs, as fast enough, that her straps of her cap would fly behind her. But she both respected her nephew's obsessions and his collections deeply. She knew all his favorite dishes and cooked them with skilled variety. She obligingly cushioned all his odd desires and habits. To put it shortly, Mr. Dusedan should have, by all rights, felt as in heaven. However, he had lived as such since childhood, and hence considered it simply normal. So, shielded from the deprivations of bachelor life, well occupied with his passions, and with an inborn shyness naturally disinclining him to seek female company, it must come as no surprise that Mr. Dunedan was quite content and not at all interested in changing the status quo. Now, his great passion for collecting curios and maintaining antiques had first developed after his return from university. At the time, he had found himself at a loss on what to do with all his free time in his overly large house. So he began collecting things, silly and other, within an, and within an impressively short time, he acquired an
Gone off. Is anybody else?
Same, I don't hear him.
No, I don't hear anything either.
Yeah, the sound's gone off.
Can you hear me? We've lost sound from you.
Hello.
Ah, can I?
Maybe try re-entering. Sorry. Try re-entering the space. Or just close Banter and come back in. There we go.
What's he doing? Reloading? Or just
Mhm.
re-entering?
Yeah. He's just gonna re-enter.
Does this happen normally?
Not too often. I mean, disconnections, but not randomly losing your microphone while you're in the middle of
Yeah.
something and not losing an actual connection. So this is kind of unique.
It's easy to catch
Hello.
the button though
am I
that
back?
does the mic.
Yes, we
Yeah.
can hear
Yeah.
you now.
Hey.
Awesome.
What happened?
Not
When
Don't
when
know.
sure.
when I
Suddenly we couldn't hear you anymore.
okay, when did I cut off?
It's
You were
about 3 minutes
saying-
ago.
You were saying that of him collecting his curios. That was
Ah.
just a part where it disconnected. Yep. You were just getting into explaining that.
Ba-ba-ba.
Make sure you've got a megaphone. Oh, you do.
With the university? Oh, okay, that far back. That's bad.
Yeah, it was really far back.
His great passion for collecting curios and maintaining antiques had first developed after his return from university. That's where we were? Yes?
I didn't hear that. I don't
Yeah.
think.
Completely perfect.
Is
That's
Yes.
exactly where it was.
Okay,
that where it was? Yeah.
sorry about that. Okay, had returned from university. At that time, he had found himself at a loss on what to do with all his free time in his overly large house. So he began collecting all kinds of silly things, within an impressively short time, he acquired an ensemble of 193 porcelain dogs. These find themselves systematically organized and stacked on a pyramidal etagere, managing a look that was just as comical as it was uncanny. He soon found that there were many things made from porcelain, which she seemed to not be able to resist. Malioka wares especially were able to fan covetous flames in his heart, and old Venetian glassware exuded an almost devilish attraction. And so his house began to fill with a great number of strange devices, plates, pots, cups, and glasses that were never used, and their appeal simply lay in the fact that no other had them. These things, however, needed to be housed, and the furniture that was to do that had to be in harmony with these artifacts of lost times. Thereby, he fell into an obsession with old furniture, antique dresses with ornate brass hinges, enormous walk-in wardrobes brown with age, mysterious secretary desks with flowery designs, hidden compartments, and all manner of fun surprises. To all that, there joined over time a large collection of folders filled with copper engravings, rare books, coins, wood carvings, amber and pearl crafts, curiosities of all kinds, including ore and gem samples, as well as Japanese, Chinese paint, animal, and bronze wares. So that his house ended up more overgrown with all these things than an old East India man's on the side was with mussels. By some random quirk of fate, however, one day his excuse me, by a random quirk of fate, on a particular day, his passion for collecting and maintaining things was given a new direction, however. He had visited an exhibition of live birds, and having chosen to buy some lottery tickets, found himself with a pair of sunbirds. These graceful and charming birds, with their beautiful looks, the cuteness of their antics, and their also lovely songs, quickly left a deep impression on him, and he desired more. Soon he had sought the acquaintance of a locally known bird expert, and and oops, I'm sorry, acquaintance of a locally known bird expert, and with great vigor plunged into these new waters. Straight away he had subscribed to all the relevant magazines and bought a shelf's worth of bird-keeping books. He felt as if he had managed to glimpse something of a deeper truth, and with this new obsession he was well and truly on a new world. Following the advice of the bird expert, but words failed him. So she continued. My father loves that very much. When my sisters are at school, and I away for work, he is alone so very long. He can barely walk, even with his cane, and therefore he can't leave the house. So he spends his days laying on that couch, teaching the birds new tricks. And what a well-learned bird that was. That is, sorry. It's sometimes almost scary how clever he is. She gave Mr. Tuzdan a very insistent look. You see my point, right? Were I to sell this bird, my father would miss him every day, and he's got so few things left to enjoy. It was an odd thing. Mr. Tuzdan suddenly found his burning desire for that bird doused. Indeed, he almost considered the fact that he had intended to buy it a black-hearted cruelty. Yes, of course, naturally. In Duby managed to stutter. The young woman who stood in front of him so freely and sprightly, spurring his confusion and anxieties by simply looking him into the eyes. But unlike similar events in the past, there was a pleasant warmth to her look, and he felt it soothe his heart. And so he reaffirmed more steadily, never. I would not dream of buying that bird. She smiled, a small smile, like sunlight breaking through a windswept canopy, and she offered her hand and proffered, we are in agreement, then? Shaking this warm, fair hand was truly a dangerous endeavor, but he took this handle skillfully, and he joined the pleasant warmth spreading around his heart. They returned to the elderly man, who was visibly glad of their negotiation. The parrot, the darling of everyone, had left his cage and sat upon Venula's finger. He was prompted to give kisses to celebrate the agreement, and he did so readily, first to the young woman and then to Mr. Tuzdan. Another very dangerous situation. The bird proceeded to then fluff his feathers and ask, Head pats, please? And, having received the payment, he began to sing, then whistle an adorable postmaster signal, cried like a child, coughed like an old crone, and showed many more of his talents. Really, it was quite amazing. Seeing this, Mr. Tuzdan rejoiced, and lose all shyness and to his great astonishment, he was able to speak well-spoken, cohesive sentences. And when it came to offer his goodbyes, he was even able to add a well-placed request to please be allowed to return for a visit, to see this wonderful bird again. He was graciously granted that boon. Mr. Tuzdan, what happened? Why do you look so pensively up into the clouds, so thoughtfully towards the heavens, as if you try to understand the mysteries of the cosmos? Why do you have a skipping step and a joyous hymn in your everyday walk, instead of your sober and evenly pace? Whence does your sudden surge of interest in Sylvia, commonly known as Robin, stem? Even though you've never previously shown any favor to this particular singer, what is one to say about your blatant dismissal of all those other fine animals in your workroom, having only eyes for that one Robin, which you observe with adoring eyes? Are your sunbirds any less dainty, your parrotlets any less droll, or your African finches any less cute than they were before? What did your blue throat do to you, that you its that you now ignore it as it sings its tune while bathing in the sun-warmed sand. And what's the meaning of your ever more regular excursions into that shabby suburb? Moving along the road until you reach a certain house, only to then sneak about as if a man of ill repute, daring barely to look upon that house? Do you remember what happened on that recent sunny December day, when the world was clad in that pure, fresh first snow? An invigorating cold day that must have steeled your spirit, as with great boldness you dared to gaze toward the windows of that house, and spotted a young woman who bowed towards you in reverently recognition, and perhaps you might have even seen her light up in response to your return. You, of course, hurried back up the street, where, out of sight, you began to behave even more oddly, hopping about and proclaiming poems into the cold winter day. Must have been really in the clouds that day, for you failed to notice the great grey shrike who sunned itself on top of a tree, or the wild kingfishers diving into the still not quite frozen brook, even though such a spectacle would have elated you on any other day. Mr. Duzedon, you must remember that upon that homeward road you acted even more a fool. So much so that you gave yourself quite the scare when you realized that you had exclaimed into the snow-muffled winter air loudly a name. Yes, it was Vendela. What is one to think about that, Mr. Duzedon? You calmed only, after all, after looking around very thoroughly to make sure that nobody had heard. You tried to tell yourself there was a love for the melodic sound of that name, which made you exclaim it. But whether you believed yourself, that excuse is quite uncertain. Yes, there had been a very odd change in Mr. Duzedon. For 8 days he endured without the parrot's wonderful presence. But then he was drawn back, like pulled by an irresistible magnet, and once again came to see him. The next time he only endured for 3 days, and soon he was a daily visitor in the house of the Rolands. He had become a very well-known character to the whole family, and a very well-liked one too. The old Roland was delighted to have a partner for conversation, and the two younger daughters, Susan and Regina, found in him a pliable playmate, whose pockets seemed to never run out of candies. And Vendela, well, who knew what was going on behind those deep, dark eyes? But it could be noted that they seemed to flash brightly when the doorbell rang, and when the well-known steps rang through the hallway. Quite notable as well was the weird fact that Mr. Duzedon, who had, after all, come ostensibly only to behold the family's parrot, had come and gone now several times without so much as sparing said parrot half a look, even on some rather lengthy visits. Quite a startling inconsistency with the usual behavior of this young man. Christmas time was now fast approaching, and this household, like many others at this time, was soon the home of many secrets. Mr. Duzedon enjoyed the honor of full confidence of all three girls, and so was soon privy of a multitude of plots and well-planned surprises, having been made into some sort of Christmas confessor. These things pleased and touched him greatly, since he had lost his parents young and had grown up lonely without any siblings. He felt moved in a new and lovely way, and for the first time in his life he realized that he had been deprived during his childhood, despite all the material abundance, of something that no amount of wealth buy. It had come up during conversation that he hadn't, for as long as he could remember, celebrated Christmas in the presence of children. Only ever with his elderly aunt on the eve of the first day of Christmas. She would decorate the Christmas tree herself, with decorations she kept in a neat little drawer for the rest of the year, many of which dated back to his childhood. The gifts would always be the same. 6 pairs of self-knitted socks and a couple of trifles for him. After all, what else could I possibly gift you, my dear boy? You've already got everything you could possibly want, she would comment when gifting him. She She would, however, bake many family recipes this time, an innumerable amount of cakes which neither one of them would eat, would soon overflow the pantry. They would be gifted away over time. Mr. Duzedan's return gift, on the other hand, ever since he had come of age, had been a small box of gold coins, which his diligent aunt saved. They would finish that day, usually with dinner and a bit of punch, which Mr. Duzedan brew himself, made out of port, red wine and rum, and they would sip on that and then head to bed, usually putting the entire affair to bed with them at around 10 p.m. Now, the exact course of the conversation he could not quite remember. But at some point, Mr. Duzedan must have uttered the desire to at least once celebrate the season in the presence of children. And before he could think better of it, he had been invited. This turned out to fit quite well into the pre-existing schedule, as the family of Roland celebrated Christmas Eve, and therefore he could join them without disrupting his hallowed family tradition. Something for which he most certainly would not have had the stomach. He had grown quite bold over the preceding weeks, and he had even managed to request that he may see himself as a member of the family for that day, so that he may join the gifting of gifts. The granting of that request made him very happy, and he mustered all his discipline not to break out in somersaults on his way back home. To his great relief, he managed to do that and suppress this embarrassing inclination. From this day forward, Mr. Duzedan was seen quite frequently carrying boxes and packages around. Since these were quite common accessories for men around this time, particularly fathers and friendly-old uncles, he managed to avoid any undue attention. Still, the young man's heart trembled quite fiercely at the thought of being recognized by some acquaintance. Now, the play kitchen for Regina and the fable-like dollhouse for Susan, well, they would have surely not been a problem to explain. But what, oh what, should he have said were his intention with that olive-brown silk sheet, or the pearl-studded necklace that the city's finest jeweler had crafted after the drawings of a locally known artist? Claiming that these gifts were for his aunt would have been a lie far too easily pierced. Yet, despite that, he continued as if in a rush, purchasing all kinds of things that would to him seem like fitting and pleasant gifts. And that this behavior was most conspicuous was something he did not even begin to suspect. He had, after all, lived a life far too lonely, and had a far too weak understanding of the value of money. When he came to visit the Rolands shortly before Christmas, he found the elderly father alone and in a very cheerless mood. After a few words of greetings, the old man asked him with a shaking voice, "Would you still like to buy the parrot, Mr. Duzedan?" When he was only answered with a confused look, he explained, "You see, I'm being pressed by an old debt that I was forced to take on due to a severe illness, which is the cause for my current suffering. Until recently, I was able to pay it in small rates, but now my creditor demands that I pay the rest in full, and with Christmas so close at hand and the expenses at the start of the new year," trails off. "And after all, it is a serious luxury for a man such as I to own such a valuable bird. So I have reconsidered the situation. I shall buy a young parrot, which has learned nothing yet, which should come about 36 marks with the rest of the money that will be left from paying off my debts, and I shall sit here and teach it so that it may be as well learned as the old bird." Hearing this, a thought shot through Mr. Duzedan's head, as brilliant as a falling star, and he answered, "Most certainly, I would be delighted to buy the parrot, but you'll have to hang on to him until next year so that I may have time to furnish a place for him." Since he had enough money on him, he handed over the agreed upon 500 marks and took his leave. At the start of the journey home, he felt quite uneasy and concerned. This was really the first time in his life that he had come face to face with the hardships of another man. But his dour mood was soon excised, since he realized that it was well in his hands to share with these people which he had come to love and respect his affluence. Had one looked into Mr. Duzedan's window on this night, one would have witnessed a rather weird sight, as Mr. Duzedan was rubbing his hands and even his legs restlessly under his bed covers, as if freezing in his very well-heated room. It was, however, only giddy anticipation which kept our good man up, and very restless. On the morn of the 24th, Mr. Duzedan woke, excited and joyful, as if turned into a child himself, impatiently awaiting the upcoming evening. He had packed all his accumulated gifts into a very large trunk, and now ordered a carrier to deliver it at 5 p.m. sharp to the house of the Rolands. One box, however, he kept, and he took it with him to the house himself. Once he arrived there, the box kept his contributions to the decorations of the Christmas tree, the decoration of which was an act he had specially requested to be part of. When he arrived, he found the father and the two younger sisters waiting in the living room. "We aren't allowed to enter," Susan said, and pointed at the door. "Vendula is preparing everything in there." "But I still may, isn't that right?" Mr. Duzedan asked, and received an affirmation. He knocked, and then slunk through the narrowly opened door. Behind him he could hear Regina burst, "I managed to spy something glittering!" But it was of no concern. Vendula, on the other hand, was already hard at work and sporting a rosy blush from her, or excuse me, and was already sporting a rosy blush from all that work. And her dark eyes beamed with joy. She had rolled up her sleeves and exposed her well-toned, beautiful arms. She had also already added the very basis of every well-decorated Christmas tree, the golden and silver apples. Mr. Duzedan produced his box and opened it. It was filled to the brim with birds. Marzipan, hard candy, and chocolate birds, of course. He had collected them with great effort from among the city's various confectionaries and candy manufacturers. Parrots and finches, ducks, swans, geese and chickens, canaries, herons, all kinds were mixed in there. His one frustration was that the most colorful and magnificent of all of these delicious birds were clearly sprung forth from the fantasy of the confectionaries and decidedly not realistic representations at all. What would you even call this creature? He asked. She asked, sorry. What would you even call this creature? She asked, as he presented her with one of the birds. Pheasant, gull, swan, vulture is the shortest name I came up with it, considering that they are all represented in it. I'll just call him Birdie, she answered, and I'll just put him here on the tree. He aided her as best he could, but it turned out he was somewhat clumsy in decorating. Maybe we should split the work, Venula noted. I shall do the attaching, and you will give me the decorations. And Mr. Duzan was very content with that. But was it really necessary that during this activity their hands touched so much, and that their eyes would hang upon each other? Was it truly unavoidable that during their discussions on where to place a particular item, their shoulders would softly touch and their hands meet yet again? And what had come about them that made them laugh about things that really had no comedy in them, but just as quickly made them fall into silence? And since when did Venula, who usually was such a self-reliant woman, request climbing up and down a chair? Well, despite these questions, they finally managed to place the last of the lights on the highest ring of the tree, and Venula stood upon her chair and took in her work. Well, finally done, she sighed. How regrettable, he commented. He looked up to her and offered a hand to help her down. She slid down towards him and into an embrace, holding onto his arms. They kissed, and Mr. Duzan held her close and asked silently, "Forever?" "Now and forever." Her answer came just as silently. Venula's dress must have strafed something on the tree, as the moment was broken by the sound of something falling from it. Both were startled and jumped apart. Mr. Duzdan managed to spot the cause, a small gingerbread hat, now broken in two. He picked it up and handed it to Venula, who pushed the two halves together and then offered one of them to him. They both ate the halves in silence, and then, laughing shrilly, went hand in hand to ask Mr. Roland for his blessings. The two younger sisters recovered quickly from the shocking development, and they were soon skipping merrily around the room. The parrot sung, whistled, and trotted along, and Mr. Duzdan was made to dance with one sister after the other. All the while, Mr. Roland was plugging his ears in mock dismay. At last, the large trunk had been brought into the house, and the presents had been handed out, and Mr. Roland was solemnly regifted his parrot. Now there was such an abundance of love, happiness, thankfulness, and many more good feelings in this place that was truly a Christmas miracle that they all managed to fit into that small home. And that's the end.
That's sweet.
That was awesome.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry, my headset
Yeah.
disconnected right at the end. Never.
And I
Oh.
missed some of the middle. I would like to ask you if you would post the story maybe on our Discord so that if we missed any of it, like I missed some of the middle, that we could read what we missed. That would be really appreciative.
Okay. I can't do it right now because there are probably quite a few spelling errors in there. That would be
Sure.
embarrassing.
Oh, no
Not a problem.
No
Yeah,
problem.
but
know why,
I'll
but-
do that.
I thought
Huh?
it would turn into like a, I
Sweet.
thought it was gonna be a tragedy, like the whole thing with the parrot.
I was
and stuff. I
afraid.
was like, yeah, I was like, this
afraid the
parrot's
bird was
gonna
gonna
like
die.
do some crazy shit, isn't it?
No, we're just waiting.
No. I mean, we Germans are infamous for our fables, but we don't have that many, tragic
Yeah.
crystals.
Good.
That's
That's
a bit
good.
much.
Yeah.
So,